October 8th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit to Singapore. The South Korean leader is set to hold key meetings with Singaporean leaders on Tuesday to ink deals on cooperation in areas like advanced technology and energy security. Missile strikes and fighting continued on the first day of the anniversary of the October 7th attacks, with Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah all targeting Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared on Monday that his country would continue its offensive. Samsung Electronics estimated its third quarter operating profit at 9.1 trillion won, or around $6.8 billion. It's up over 274% from a year earlier, but also a drop from the second quarter, which saw an operating profit of over 10 trillion won. After wrapping up his visit to the Philippines, President Yoon Suk-yeol is now in Singapore. He'll have a tight schedule as he focuses on economic exchanges with the port nation. Our Kim Do-yeon has what to expect.
President Yoon Suk-yeol is looking to enhance cooperation with Singapore as he starts a state visit to the Southeast Asian country, the second stop on his tour of Southeast Asia for the ASEAN summit. Yoon on Monday evening touched down in Singapore and is set to start his official engagements on Tuesday. President Yoon will receive an official welcome at Singapore's Parliament House and meet President Tharman Shanmugaratnam. Afterward, he will meet Prime Minister Lawrence Wong for a summit. The two leaders are set to sign MOUs before speaking to the press. There will also be a luncheon followed by a meeting with Senior Minister Lee Hsien-loong. In the evening, President Tharman will host a state banquet for the first couple. The state visit to Singapore comes as South Korea and Singapore will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties next year. Singapore has become South Korea's second largest trade and investment partner among ASEAN members, and Yoon's visit is set to focus on economic exchanges.
Having closely cooperated over the past 50 years, focusing on trade and investment, the two sides would expand into areas like artificial intelligence, digital technology, and advanced technologies. In response to global economic uncertainties, we will also strengthen cooperation on strategic and material supply chains in cutting-edge industries such as energy and biotechnology.
Above all, Singapore is a key economic security partner for us in terms of supply chain security, serving as a strategic hub for maritime logistics connecting the Middle East and Europe. During this visit, we plan to prioritize discussions on supply chain cooperation between the two countries, particularly focusing on energy.
Security will also be addressed. Yoon, before wrapping up his visit, will also take part in the distinguished Singapore lecture series organized by a leading think tank, IC's Yusof Ishak Institute, to introduce Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy, the country's cooperation with ASEAN, and the prospect for peace and prosperity in the region if his vision of Korea unification is achieved. After this will be his main stop of this overseas trip, the ASEAN summit in Laos. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, Singapore.
Marking 1 year since Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, the so-called Axis of Resistance launched a joint attack on Israel, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to continue fighting. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Marking 1 year since the armed conflict between Hamas and Israel began, tensions remain higher than ever as the so-called Axis of Resistance launched joint attacks against Israel. Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis launched a series of airstrikes against Israel on Monday. The Houthi rebels fired surface-to-surface missiles from Yemen, temporarily halting the first anniversary commemoration events held throughout Israel. Hamas also launched a series of rockets from Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, while Hezbollah fired a total of 135 rockets. The projectiles were intercepted by Israel, and no casualties were reported from the attacks. During a cabinet meeting on the same day, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stressed that fighting back against Iran's axis of evil is essential to Israel's security. He said Israel will eliminate Hamas and ensure the remaining hostages would be returned safely. The Israeli leader also vowed to prevent another attack like what took place on October 7, 2023 from happening again. U.S. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris marked the first anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel by issuing statements of support for Israel. Biden stressed that Washington remains fully committed to the safety of the Israelis, the security of Israel, and its right to exist. He also said that the U.S. supports Israel's right to defend itself from the militant groups as well as Iran. The U.S. leader also said the year-long conflict has resulted in many civilian casualties, which he says was due to terrorists hiding and operating among innocent people. Former U.S. President Donald Trump continued his criticism of the Biden administration, saying that the conflict would not have happened if he was still president. Trump also said he would support Israel striking Iran's nuclear facilities in response to Tehran's missile attacks on Israel last week. According to Trump, Israel is entitled to attack. And amid the escalating tensions in the Middle East, oil prices rose more than 3% on Monday. Brent crude even surpassed $80 per barrel for the first time since August. Last week, Brent rose more than 8%, while West Texas Intermediate rose more than 9% on week after Iran's missile attack against Israel sparked concerns that the response from Israel would be aimed at Tehran's oil facilities. 이승재, Arirang News.
We take a look at where things stand now in Gaza and where to go from here at a moment where regional conflict only expands, with the end barely in sight. Our Kim Bo-kyung has this report.
Over 40,000 deaths and 90% of the Gaza population, amounting to 1.9 million displaced. These are the numbers that are left from the war, with it already being 1 year since the Palestinian militant group Hamas launched an unprecedented attack on Israel from the Gaza Strip. Though devastating it had been throughout the year, experts say there were key dates of the conflict this year that made this war spill into neighboring Lebanon. In May this year, U.S. President Joe Biden called on Hamas to accept a ceasefire proposal of 3 phases, backed by other countries such as Qatar and Egypt. In July, however, as Fuad Shukr, known to have been the right-hand man of Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, got killed in an Israeli airstrike, and the head of the political bureau of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, died after having attended the swearing-in of Iranian president, ceasefire talks lost momentum. In September, Israel confirmed the deaths of 6 hostages found in the tunnel complex under Gaza, sparking protests across Israel, with anger directed at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet for failing to secure a hostage deal. One expert says this, in part, led to Netanyahu reaffirming his will to wipe out Hamas and weaken Hezbollah for the sake of his political career and to end the war.
Ever since the war began on October 7th, Israel's 2 goals were to wipe out Hamas and save hostages. And for that, it is necessary to target Hezbollah to some extent, as they have helped Hamas to have force. That is why military operations are currently being carried out in southern Lebanon aimed at weakening Hezbollah.
Given that Israel targeted Hamas and Hezbollah are Iran-backed, concerns are mounting about whether the conflict would lead to a full-fledged war between Israel and Iran. Experts say Iran would not be willing to engage in an all-out war, as it does not have the capability to do so, making it Israel's call.
Israel is expected to retaliate. The intensity of it and to what extent Iran can withstand would be a critical factor. This period of time, right until the US presidential election, is the optimal period for Israel, as once the elections are over and a new president is elected, there may be more pressure against Israel, limiting its room to maneuver.
Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Despite his country facing a security crisis for 1 entire year, it seems like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is nowhere near close to losing power in his country. Now, when will he let go of the Gaza war? For more, we're joined by Professor Robert Lawrence. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
So let's jump right into it. How is Netanyahu really building on his power even further in his country?
Yeah, well, we've seen some polls, recent polls out of Israel, showing that Benjamin Netanyahu and his governing coalition would win if another election were held today. Actually, since the first time since the Hamas attack on October 7th, they would win an outright majority in a hypothetical election. I would argue he's building on the momentum from this recent unprecedented success in dealing with the axis of resistance. They've been able to take down the top 3 tiers of Hezbollah's command structure. They eliminated Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, of all places, and they showed the distance they can cover by hitting the Houthi port of Odesa. They largely repelled the ballistic missile attack last week from Iran, even though some missiles did get through, then they're going unreported. But in general, Israel seems to be on the front foot in this regional conflict that now has 6 or 7 fronts. So he's riding this wave of momentum, but that doesn't necessarily translate into steadfast support in Israel. He still has a lot of domestic problems to deal with, and I think this wave could end quickly if operational success is halted, or if something bad happens to the hostages, or if the axis of resistance continues to be able to hit targets inside of Israel like we've seen in the last 24 hours in Haifa or Tel Aviv.
Well, then, does that mean that now we'll continue to, ignore Washington's call for Israel to halt the fighting in Gaza? What do you think?
All right, well, just days after President Biden pushed for a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon, Netanyahu ordered the strike that killed Nasrallah. Additionally, all of the shuttle diplomacy and the multilateral efforts made during the summer didn't yield any ceasefire in Gaza. So it would appear that the U.S. or the current administration is either not able or not willing to steer Israeli decision-making in the direction it prefers. Naturally, Biden has the capacity to make himself very difficult to ignore if he applies the right pressure.
Right.
But as of yet, I would argue because of U.S. electoral politics, this hasn't been a course of action that the administration deems necessary.
Well, then, do you think such firm grip on the war will eventually play a critical role in the upcoming election in November? What's your take on this?
Well, I think it's going to depend on how circumstances evolve in the next days and weeks. So any escalation is going to negatively affect oil prices. And this is happening at a time of economic hardship in America. Americans have been dealing with inflation for years, and adding high energy costs in the lead up to an election is going to hurt the incumbent administration. Also, I believe there's 7 swing states that are all in the margin of error, meaning that the difference between candidates is just 1 or 2 points. Now, in some of these swing states, like Nevada and Pennsylvania, you have large Jewish populations.
Right.
In Michigan, you have a large Arab population. And in a recent poll by the the Arab American Institute, Harris is 18 points behind where Joe Biden was in the 2020 election right now. 18 points is very significant. And even actually toe-to-toe amongst likely Arab voters, she's trailing Trump right now. So the administration is walking a bit of a tightrope in its electoral strategy. She can't afford to look weak and support a major U.S. ally in the region, but she doesn't want to upset the more progressive wing of the party with whom, for whom this is a major issue. So, if you contrast that with the Republicans, there's wide support for Israel. So there's very little risk in sticking to a pro-Israeli agenda for the Trump-Vance ticket. But, if like we saw in the presidential debate the other night, this is a very difficult line to take for the Harris-Walz administration or candidacy, because they're more vulnerable to voters' reactions to what happens in the conflict. So Middle East policy could be a determining factor in voting amongst certain demographics, and in swing states, especially where the vote is most important, this could have serious effects.
Well, Professor Lawrence, then why is Israel yet to retaliate against Iran? I mean, is it still contemplating what actions to take? I mean, how likely is it that Israel will hit oil facilities in Iran, like you briefly mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I think Israel is taking its time in weighing out its options. It's going to retaliate, but how is difficult to answer. Regarding what Israel will target, there are several options. They could hit conventional military sites like launch sites, command and control centers, and air defenses. Economically, they could hit power generation plants or petrochemical plants. Of course, it could hit Iranians' nuclear facilities, though they are deep in the ground, or try to hit its oil infrastructure. Or in the most extreme case, it could target leadership personnel. That's an option that would have seemed crazy a couple of months ago, but given the circumstances now, it's on the table, I think. All of these will have repercussions. Iran or its proxies could target Gulf states and their oil infrastructures. Shipping around the Bab al-Mandab and the Red Sea could be under increased threat through the Houthis. Or if the nuclear facilities are hit, that may encourage Iran to withdraw from the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and rush towards making a bomb. So I would imagine there are a lot of robust debates going on in Israeli circles right now about what targets should be in a cost-benefit analysis. But really only the Israeli decision makers know. But I'm sure that oil facilities are near the top of the list.
Right, it won't get any prettier. All right, Professor Lawrence, thank you so much for connecting with us this morning. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye.
South Korea's current account was in the black for the fourth straight month in August on the back of booming semiconductor exports. Preliminary data from the Bank of Korea on Tuesday showed that the country's current account balance in August recorded a surplus of $6.6 billion. It was driven by the goods account, which tracks exports and imports of products, logging a surplus and recording a 17th month in the black. Exports amounted to more than $57 billion, as semiconductor chip exports rose by over 38% compared to the same month the previous year. South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics recorded a lower-than-expected operating profit in the third quarter, mainly due to sluggish memory chip sales. On Tuesday, the company reported an estimated operating profit of 9.1 trillion won, or just over $6.7 billion in the third quarter. That's more than double compared to the same period in 2023, but over 10% down from the quarter two this year. However, sales were up by around 17% compared to last year, making it a record high for any quarter. Early on Tuesday, and for the second straight day, North Korea sent trash-carrying balloons toward South Korea. According to the Joint Chief of Staff, the balloons could float toward northern Gyeonggi-do province and other parts of the Greater Seoul area. It called on people to refrain from touching the balloons and to be cautious of the balloons potentially dropping. More than 5,000 balloons have been sent by the North since late May. Russia, for a second consecutive day, attacked a civilian vessel in a Ukrainian Black Sea port. According to Reuters on Monday, a Palau-flagged ship was hit by a Russian ballistic missile in Odesa. Reports say the strike killed one Ukrainian employee of a private cargo handling company and injured 5 foreign nationals. It's the second such strike by Moscow in southern Ukraine this week, after it attacked a civilian vessel loaded with corn on Sunday. Russia has been targeting Ukrainian grain exports since withdrawing from the Black Sea Grain Initiative in July last year. Now, let's take a look at the stories from around the world with our very own Kim Si-young this morning. Good morning, Si-young.
Good morning, Dami.
So let's start in Tunisia. The election results are in, and apparently the incumbent president has won a second term. Fill us in.
That's right, Dami. So the incumbent president, Tunisian President Kais Saied, has secured a second term after winning Sunday's election with a landslide. Now, according to Tunisia's Electoral Commission on Monday, Saied won 90.69% of the vote. Voter turnout was low at 28.8%, which was the lowest since demonstrations in 2011 ousted dictator Zine Al Abidine Ben Ali. 66-year-old Saied, who has been in power since 2019, ran against two candidates, Char party leader Zuhair Magzawi and Ayachi Zammel, a former lawyer who was jailed in September after gaining traction for election-related offences. Saied has been criticized for hindering the country's change to democracy, stemming from the Arab Spring Revolution in 2011. Tunisia has since seen many of the president's political opponents and other critics arrested, including several presidential contenders and senior figures from the country's biggest parties, while many of Saied's opponents were banned from running in this election. Despite the criticism, Saied called his victory a continuation of the revolution, adding that he will cleanse the country of the corrupt, traitors and conspirators. Now moving on, the mayor of the capital city of Mexico's state of Guerrero was killed on Sunday, less than a week after he took office. Alejandro Arcos was killed just 6 days after becoming mayor of Chilpancingo, a city of some 280,000 people in southwestern Mexico. Guerrero State Governor Evelyn Salgado confirmed Mayor Arcos's death after unverified images had appeared on social media showing the mayor's severed head on top of a pickup truck. The Guerrero State Attorney General's office has said it has begun an investigation into Arcos's murder. Mayor Arcos's death came just 3 days after the city government's new secretary, Francis Tapia, was shot to death. A British doctor pleaded guilty on Monday after attempting an audacious plot to inject his mother's partner with poison. Now, prosecutors said Thomas Kwan, who was in a dispute over the inheritance of his mother's home, disguised himself as a home visit nurse, creating a fake ID and wearing a false mustache, beard and wig. He then drove to his mother's home with false number plates on his car and, while pretending to be the nurse, injected poison into his mother's partner, Patrick O'Hara. The prosecutor said that sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction. In the Spanish city of Tarragona, the Catalan traditional contest of building human towers took place on Sunday with a total of 42 teams competing in the biennial Castells competition. Some 11,000 spectators watched the competition, which showcased teams of up to 500 men, women and children compete to build the tallest tower. This year, a team from Villafranca captured the top spot, winning the €16,000 prize. The Castells, or human towers, were added to UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2010, with the first competition taking place in the Tarragona Bull Ring in 1932.
Today marks already the 5th autumn season term out of 6, and this is when dew turns into frost. It's a foggy start to the day for inland regions, with Gimpo, Wonju and Gwangju International Airport being under a low visibility warning. Meanwhile, rain is in the forecast for the east coast with strong winds. Eastern parts of Gangwon-do could see up to 40 millimeters of rainfall into tonight. Jeju Island will see rain through this morning. The temperature roller coaster keeps on rolling. It's a cooler start to the day, but the highs will be 1 to 5 degrees higher than yesterday afternoon. Now for a closer look, Seoul and Daejeon should be getting up to 24 degrees Celsius. Under sunnier skies this afternoon, Busan will be rainy with a high of 25 degrees. Decent air quality is in the forecast nationwide today. Then rain is in store for Jeju tomorrow on Hangul Day, but the rest of the country will have pleasant autumn weather with large daily temperature differences. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have at this hour. We'll be back with a live coverage of the joint statement from South Korean and Singaporean leaders at 12:45 p.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.
children's. Laughter, hope, dream. K-animation belongs in them. Interesting and valuable story that transcends between everyday life and dream. Surprising spectacle where imagination becomes real. An array of subjects catering from infants to adolescents. For our story to reach all corners of the world. K-animation makes healthy laughter for children. Completely new. But something anyone can relate with. Flawlessly made. The laughs and tears that go with it. K-drama. Korea is coming at you with another story to tell.
K-drama, the charm of Korea that captivates the world. Love like a K-drama. A story of us where hope and despair coexist. Fun and refreshingly satisfying. K-dramas carry warmth and move people's hearts. Meet the fascinating stories of Korea through K-dramas.
We are here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Tuesday, October 8th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and this is News Generation. Today, we're joined by Kwon Ji-yeon.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. And Brooke Prince.
Hello, happy to be here.
Hello. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Now, like always, we're going to start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items trending online. We start with the South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's three-leg trip to Southeast Asia. On Monday, President Yoon and Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. upgraded their countries' relationship to a strategic partnership. The two leaders signed a joint declaration to solidify this partnership and agreed to strengthen cooperation in areas such as security, the economy, and energy. Now, this is the first time the two nations have elevated their relations since establishing diplomatic ties back in 1949. Moving on, over in Spain, the biennial Human Tower competition took place on Sunday in Tarragona. Thousands gathered at the Terraco Arena Plaza to watch more than 40 teams build towering human structures known as castels, a centuries-old Catalonian tradition. The competition has been held since 1932. Finally, back here in Korea, an interesting event took place over the weekend. The first edition of a matchmaking program at a temple for those in their 40s. Hosted by the Korean Buddhist Foundation for Social Welfare, 10 men and 10 women were selected from hundreds of applicants for a 2-day program at Hwagesa Temple in Seoul's Gangbuk-gu district. The event included games, a stroll around the temple, and a couple photo contest while enjoying snacks like tteokbokki, kimbap, and pasta. 4 couples matched successfully, and organizers say participants showed more enthusiasm when compared to similar programs for people in their 30s. So I want to ask our panelists, do you think this program, this matchmaking program, will be effective in people finding a love? And why do you think it has even included older people when compared to the previous generations?
Well, as a single woman in her 30s whose parents are constantly hounding her for grandchildren, I think this news feed was tailored very specifically for me and for anyone who is still sort of seeking out that life partner.
Right.
I think that there's a lot of fatigue when it comes to online dating, especially as you get older. It becomes a real struggle. So I really appreciate seeing these more creative ways of matchmaking and all of the meetups that are popping up. I also think it takes a lot of pressure off a date if you have an activity to do, right? I always like going to the movies or something like that. So going to a temple, and as we saw in the VCR, there are many different activities that they were allowed to do together.
Very fun activities, right?
Exactly. So it sounds like a peaceful environment to see if love might blossom. And I really wish all of the potential happy couples a lovely future together. And who knows, maybe I will sign up when I'm in my 40s if I'm still single by then.
Well, I have very useful information at the end of our news feed, Brooke, so stay tuned for that. And meanwhile, I also want to ask you, Chuyeon, what are your thoughts about this matchmaking program?
Well, first, it was such a pity that I can't participate.
You can.
I can't. Well, I do believe that this program will be kind of very effective in helping single people find their significant others. The peaceful environment of the temple offers a unique atmosphere for genuine connections to develop each other. And expanding the age group to include those in their 40s reflects a growing recognition of the diverse needs of individuals seeking their companionship. And in most dating matching programs, think about it, participants wear the best clothes from their wardrobes.
That's right.
However, in this temple matching programs, wearing temple clothing allows for a great, uniforms allows them for a greater emphasis on their inner self.
Oh, I never thought about that.
Yes, indeed. And this approach kind of encourages deeper connections as participants can focus on their personalities and values rather than their external appearances.
Maybe that's why these programs are becoming more popular among a wider range of generation. Now, the information that I wanted to give you, Brooke, the next edition of the Temple Matchmaking Program is scheduled for next month at Baekhyangsa Temple in Jeollanam Province. So write it down, with participants in their 30s. Perfect. And that was our news feed for this Tuesday. So we're now going to move on to our main discussion of the day by taking a look at the screen. Tomorrow, October 9th, is Hunger Day in Korea. a day that celebrates the creation of the Korean alphabet, Hangul, by King Sejong of the Joseon dynasty in the 15th century. With the growing global interest in Korean culture, more people around the world are now eager to learn the Korean language. Today on News Gen, we'll be exploring how the younger generation overseas is picking up Korean. Right, so this year marks the 578th anniversary of the Korean alphabet Hangul. So let's first start by talking about how learning Korean has gained popularity internationally. So I want to ask you, Brooke, have you noticed this trend?
Definitely. My siblings always ask me to teach them new Korean phrases whenever I go back home. And they actually remember a lot of them. I give them little pop quizzes whenever I visit. And you might think, well, that's because they have a family member who lives in Korea. That's why they're interested. But I think they would have been exposed to Korean content no matter what, because the Korean wave is just so prevalent everywhere.
Right.
You now hear K-pop on the radio all the time, and people are always talking about the latest viral K-drama going on. So I think what that does is it really piques people's curiosity. And before you know it, a hobby turns into a fully fledged language learning journey. And the numbers show that as well. From 2009 to 2016, enrollment in Korean language classes at U.S. universities surged by 78%. And Korean is now the 6th most popular language on a popular language learning app, overtaking even Italian, which surprised me because Italian is a Romance language. And typically, for English speakers, Romance languages are much easier to learn. Whereas on the other hand, Korean is defined by the U.S. State Department as a super hard language.
Super hard.
And they define it as being exceptionally difficult for native English speakers to learn. I can attest to that. The word order is completely different. There are all these unfamiliar sounds that your mouth has to get used to making. But I think what Korean has going for it is that people are so passionate about the content that they are willing to take on that mountain. They are willing to take on the challenge and invest the time, energy, and effort that it takes to learn Korean. I've done it, and I can definitely say it's worth it.
Right, and we just saw footage of people, international people from around the world taking part in K-pop dance covers and also big fans of the Korean wave, which you mentioned, and that could be some of the reasons why they've become interested in learning the Korean language as well, right?
That's right.
Right. So Brooke mentioned a couple of statistics that really show how much the international audience or learners are interested in studying Korean. Now, I also want to ask you, Yoon, are there any relevant statistics? And I also want to know more of the reasons why these international learners are starting to pick up the language.
Well, of course. Well, at the University of Hamburg in Germany, the competition to get into the Korean Studies department is 8-1.
Wow.
And at Bordeaux at Montana University in France is an impressive number. 35-1.
Really?
Yes, indeed. Well, even at Leiden University in the Netherlands, more students are enrolling in Korean studies than in Chinese or Japanese. In Vietnam, students can even choose Korean as their first foreign language. And in Singapore, the number of people taking the topic or the test of proficiency in Korean is gradually increasing. So what's the reason? What's driving this growing interest in the Korean language? Well, typically, think about it, people learn languages for academic or career purposes, but when it comes to Korean, many are learning it simply, they just like it, they're into it. According to a report from an online study platform, 46% of users on their Korean language learning platform are motivated by hobbies or personal interests. And moving to a new location, new place is the reason for 14% of learners, while 11% are driven by their career goals. And in 9% of cases, parents suggest or ask their children to learn the language, and 6% are seeking official certifications. Other reasons make up 12%, with 2% learning Korean for family-related purposes.
So we've taken a look at some of the reasons which has motivated people around the world to start learning Korean. Now let's talk about the method, how young people around the world are actually learning Korean. I want to ask you, which methods are the most common or typical, and are they kind of different from how we used to learn a new language in the past, which was mostly through textbooks and lectures?
Well, I think still many people study through textbooks, but they are learning Korean language through enrolling in schools or language institutions. And there's so many good Korean teaching Korean learning programs, including Arirang. In fact, when I was younger, when I was a kid living in the UK, I learned Korean by watching Arirang's TV show called Let's Speak Korean. It was a legend, and honestly, it was the best show ever that I've watched back in the days. And a growing number of people are also studying on their own. So I'll give you some numbers here. According to the online study platform I mentioned earlier, the number of students usually self-study Korean programs has gone up by 49% in the past year. Some even incorporate K-pop songs into their learning process. And there is even a self-study book that teaches Korean through BTS songs, BTS contents, and it's become quite popular in countries like France, Egypt, and Vietnam as well.
Right, so we're seeing more diverse methods of studying Korean, not only the traditional textbooks or lectures, but also self-learning programs, online programs, and even through K-pop songs. Now, what could be some other options, Brooke?
Well, I have to say, watching those clips really brought me back to my time.
When you first studied the language?
Yes, it's very heartwarming to see how many people are now interested in learning it. And with that interest has come more and more opportunities to learn the language in various immersive environments. I want to highlight one particular place in my home country, the USA. So just this year, Concordia Language Villages opened up their Korean language village in Minnesota, and it features immersive language and cultural education. So these students can come to the camp, they can take Taekwondo classes, they can learn K-pop dances and experience other cultural experiences through the services that they offer, all while learning Korean from the native Korean speakers that act as their counselors. So of course this looks and sounds wonderful, but not everyone has access to this, right? But we've been mentioning a lot, there are other options like online language learning apps that you can use to find a foreign exchange language partner or a tutor that can help you begin your journey with learning Korean. Or if you're a more casual learner, I want to introduce you to this trend called 돌민 정금. Now, this is a combination of two words. One is idol, as in idol, like a K-pop idol, and the other one is 훈민 정금, which is the original title of Hangul, the Korean alphabet. So put them together, what it means is people take words that are typically used by K-pop idols or Korean celebrities, they romanize them into English, and then they post them on social media. So think about words that you often hear in K-dramas or K-content like oppa, 언니, 막내, or there's this really fun slang term that a lot of people are using on social media these days. It's called a nugu group, which means a group that is not quite well known throughout the world yet. So little terms like that you can learn just by exploring social media. Of course, as a Korean language learner myself, I wouldn't recommend starting with the romanized versions of words. I think we're celebrating Hangul Day, of course. I think it's important to start with Hangul, learn Hangul, and go from there. But if you just want to learn some lingo, then the 돌민 정금 is a fun trend to watch out for.
Right, maybe you can start learning 돌민 정금 when you're a bit used to learning Korean, because these are the expressions that locals actually use a lot in their daily lives, right? So as we're talking about the trend of learning Korean, the growing interest, for more on this topic, we're now going to invite a British Gen Z who studied Korean right here in Seoul after a short break. Right, so joining us today is Jessie Ashdown, a British Gen Z who studied Korean at Sogang University in Seoul. Welcome to the show, Jessie.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be on. Hello, everyone.
It's a pleasure to have you on our show. So our first question for you, Jessie, is what kind of motivated you to first start learning Korean? And could you tell us how comfortable you are with the language right now?
Yes, I would say my initial motivation for learning Korean was definitely K-pop. I started listening to K-pop at around 14 years old, and I decided that I wanted to start learning a language, and it just felt natural for me to learn a language that I was enjoying listening to. But it was actually learning Hangul that I think really boosted my interest in learning Korean, as I'm a linguistic student and it's always been a big passion of mine. And I would say that my Korean language level is the lower end of advanced, where I can definitely have very solid conversations with most people and I can understand most things. But if we have maybe a word I don't know or a very advanced topic, I might be a bit lost.
Lovely. Well, Jessie, are you seeing more people in the UK interested in learning Korean language compared to the past?
Definitely. I remember when I was initially going to attend university in the UK, I was interested in learning Korean. And when I went to the University Open event, there were so many prospective students interested in studying Korean, which really surprised me. And I went back to the UK recently, and I had a lot of my old friends who previously had no particular interest in Korean culture, all of a sudden asking me to teach them new phrases or if they were saying XYZ thing right. So I definitely think there's been a massive general increase in interest in the language.
Hi, Jessie. Thank you so much for coming on. So one last question for you. As you've mentioned, you're a big fan of K-pop. Many Korean language learners nowadays are using K-pop songs to study. Do you think that's an effective way to learn? And are there any songs that you'd recommend for beginners?
To be honest, by itself, I don't think it's a wholly effective method. But I do think there are a lot of merits to using K-pop as one of the methods you use to learn the language. For example, the biggest barrier to people learning languages is typically motivation. They'll start and then after a few weeks or months, they'll give up. But I think if you're a beginner, for example, and you set yourself a goal such as, I want to understand my favorite song, then that could be a very good motivator. And if I had to recommend a song to a beginner, I would recommend thinking of a song which they can sing along to, a song which is quite slow and where the singer has quite clear articulation. So a song that came to mind would be any song by IU. She's a very famous singer, so they have a lot of options to choose from. And I think in particular, the song Good Day is very famous. And apart from obviously the very end, which is quite difficult to sing, it's a very simple, easy melody with a very human narrative. And I think that's very essential if you're going to use a song to learn the language.
Some very great recommendation for newbies to learning Korean. All right, Jessie, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. I hope everyone has a great day.
You too. Have a nice day. Right. So we also asked our viewers who are studying Korean to share how they're learning the Korean language, and here's what 3 of them had to say. Let's take a look at the comments. A holistic therapist 777 says, to me, the best way to study any language is to love singing in that language. Now, BTS, IU, Crush, then Baek Ji-young, Komi, 2AM to name a few. Benny D97 says, my unique method is to watch K-dramas and put some subtitles in Korean and learn their expressions to understand what they say and also to get the right translated words in English and Filipino as well. RKZLTV says, I try to have as much exposure to the Korean language as possible. I read and watch Korean content, speak to Korean people, and then imitate what they say. So I think a lot of our viewers who gave the comments gave some great recommendations on some of the most effective and fun ways to start learning Korean. Now, ending off our episode today, I'm sure today's discussion has made some of our viewers, many of our viewers hopefully, more curious about the Korean language and its alphabet. And as we mentioned earlier, tomorrow is Hangul Day, which is the reason why we brought this topic on NewsGen. Let's kind of end by sharing what we find most fascinating and charming about Hangul and Korean language. Started with you, Chien.
Yes, of course. I think one of the most beautiful aspects of Korean is the shape of Hangul. It's so pretty that people even use it at patterns, like
your dress.
Like hanbok.
It's beautiful.
That's right, Hangul printing, and also in lots of accessories. There's so many Hangul printing, because you know, if you look at the design, it's so not only visually appealing but also very practical, which is why it draws attention from people worldwide. That is, for example, back in 2017, American actor Thomas McDonald sent out his first tweet in Korean. His tweets are usually simple, very straightforward expressions like "나 지루해" or "I'm bored" in English. 내일 계약 실화냐? Or is it true that school starts tomorrow in English? And also, 내일 시험인데 난 뭘 하고 있는지, or I'm taking an exam tomorrow, but what am I doing in English? He usually writes this in 반말, which is kind of an informal way that we speak in Korean. A mention of Jungkook from BTS even made headlines in the Korean entertainment
I remember
industry.
that.
You do know that? His tweet was, 야, 전정국이 나 꼬시지 마라. Or in English, it says, stop flirting with me, 전정국이, written in Korean. Fans refer to Jungkook as 전정국. Am I right? Yes, that's right.
Right.
Well, the actor, he described Korean as an elegant and ergonomic language, noting that the most interesting aspect of Hangul is its efficiency and the story behind its creation.
Yes.
Sejong the Sejong the Great, how he created this lovely language.
Right, so it has a lot of good background story behind it. It has a very attractive outer appearance, and also it can express a sentence or what you want to express in a very concise and compact way. So that could be some of the charming points of Hangul. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh gosh, I could talk about the charms of Korean all day, I think. But to save my voice, we'll try to keep it short. When I first came to Korea, actually, I only knew survival phrases. And I remember thinking, why is the word for thank you so many syllables, right? 감사합니다.
5 syllables.
5 syllables. And at the time, making my mouth make that word was so difficult. But I was determined to learn the language. I was an English teacher at the time, and I would only use English in my classrooms. So my coworkers would tell me, oh, there's no need to study Korean, it's okay. But I wanted to learn it because I just wanted to understand more. I wanted to be able to communicate with people. So eventually I went to a language institute and started learning, and that's where I joined a K-pop dance club. Fell in love with K-pop, and just like our guest Jessie mentioned, once you get the motivation to understand your favorite song,
it gets you going.
It gets you more excited to learn. So I love to sing as well. So I started singing and performing K-pop songs, and I found that once I understood Korean, I could convey the emotion a lot more. As an actress now, I perform a lot in Korean, and I still have to get private coaching sessions to make sure my pronunciation is on point and my delivery is good. So it's a language that I take very seriously. It's like a lifelong passion for me. I even got a master's degree in interpretation and translation, so I kind of took it to the extreme, but that's just how beautiful I find Korean. One of my favorite parts about learning how to translate Korean was just figuring out those words that are so difficult to translate into English. For example, we say often in Korean, 고생하셨습니다, and what it means literally in English is you suffered a hardship, which is not something we would say in many situations in English, but we say it in Korean to mean good job, you worked hard today, thank you for your hard work. So just those little quirks in the language, I find it so fun to explore, and I know that I will be learning Korean for the rest of my life.
And I think what you mentioned is kind of like the beauty of learning a new language. And there's one thing I want to say to you, Brooke, and also Juyeon today. You mentioned how it's 감사합니다, which means thank you in Korean, but there's another way to express your gratitude in Korean, which is 고맙습니다. Another 5-syllable word. So 고맙습니다, Juyeon, and 고맙습니다, Brooke, for this fruitful discussion today. And that's all from us today, but NewsGen will be back Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. We're taking tomorrow off as it's Hangul Day, a national holiday here in the country. Special thanks today to 권지연 once again.
고맙습니다.
고맙습니다. And Brooke Prince.
고생하셨습니다.
고생하셨습니다. And thank you everyone for watching, and see you on Thursday. We are News Generation. 고맙습니다.
Future of high-tech manufacturing industry. This is GFES Hadong District. We want to connect you to a future of possibilities with our own resources and specificity. By connecting spaces to save time and cost. Connecting excellent infrastructure with technology to drive innovation. Opening possibilities by connecting technology with businesses. We will expand our horizons by connecting with the world. There is land that leads to a sustainable future. Taesong Industrial Complex, a cutting-edge material parts complex, is the best strategic industrial complex in the southern coast region of Korea. Karsaman Shipbuilding Industrial Complex, a shipbuilding and marine industrial plant cluster. It is a global logistics and industrial hub with convenient transportation and high-level accessibility, making it optimal for business investment. Starting from possibilities to becoming a global business hub. From an innovative industrial city to the center of high-tech future industries. It's the beginning for the future. Linking together, making tomorrow. GFES Hadong District.